Hi guys, welcome to Internet Academy, and today we're going to talk about the age of Dryden. So previous videos we have seen age of Shakespeare, age of Milton, all these things, but now we are coming to the age of Dryden. What's so special about this age is that they were once again looking at the classical styles. They were trying to write criticisms and all these things. From here on we can see a different identity of English. So let's jump in. First, so who are the forerunners of Dryden? So who were there before Dryden? Sometimes Dryden is called the greatest man of a little age. Actually, this age is a very small age, but still it's one of the greatest ages ever to be. And first, you can see there's this person called Edmund Waller and Sir John Denham. These two peoples are regarded as his masters. So Dryden was inspired by these two people. Who are they? Edmund Waller and Sir John Denham. So after reading all their works, Dryden was influenced immediately. And so next we go, some years his elders, they were not very far apart, but for some years they were the elders and they were leaders in the reaction and taste. Whatever the taste they had, Dryden had it too. So he just followed it. And now reformers of the English versification went rugged and harsh. Now what happened was, the verse form was very different. Previously if you see Shakespeare age and all these ages, blank verse and all these verses were there, but now the verse format is changing, is coming to a proper format right now. So that's some introduction to Dryden. So let's get into his life. So Dryden's life. John Dryden was born at Aldwinkle, All Saints, Northamptonshire in 1631. Basically, he came from a Puritan education and at Westminster Abbey and at Trinity College, Cambridge. Right now, the Puritans' struggle has come down. Their influence has come down dramatically by now. But you should understand, Dryden wrote most of his works as a Catholic work. That you will understand it here. And then, his first poem, heroic stanza on the death of Oliver Cromwell. Now, immediately you realize Oliver Cromwell was the head of the Puritans. So, first work itself is about him. It is called Heroic Stanzas on the Death of Oliver Cromwell. And next, we have his wonderful works. It's called Astrea Redex. It's celebration of the happy restoration of Charles II. Now, what happens is the king comes back to the parliament. So, first he writes about Cromwell and then he goes to the he writes about Charles II. That is Astrea Redex. It's one of his most famous works. But then he wrote dramas, poems. He was also a critic. You should realize all those things. And then, now what happened was during the Milton's time, all the theatres were closed. So now you realize the theatres are all opening up. Now all the theatres are opening up, and now people are starting to write dramas. And one such drama is All for Love. This is a very wonderful work. It's basically Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra rewritten, but this time using all the unities in place. This work is filled with those proper unities. It happens in one day. Everything is perfect. All for Love. It's one of his most famous works. Now, in the 1670 he becomes poet laureate. So only from him the poet laureate is coming out. And then in 1681 he opened a new chapter publication of the first of his great satires and verse, and that verse was Absalom and Achitophel. He takes Bible story and he compares it with the present scenario. That is Absalom and Achitophel. It's an important work that you should remember. And next we are going to, as I said, no, he compared with his own political thing. Charles II was King David, Duke of Monmouth paraded Absalom, Shaftesbury was Achitophel. So you can understand the biblical story compared to the present political story. And now he also wrote a theological poem called Religio Leci. This became a very popular poem and it was the defense of the Church of England. He was for Church of England, so he wrote Religio Leci. And then James II came to the throne. There he wrote Hind and the Panther. This was an argument between Protestants and Catholics. So here the Hind might refer to one thing and Panther might refer to one thing. So argument in favor of Roman Catholics. He had been converted. So by this time he had converted to Catholicism, and Revolution of 1688 he refused allegiance to William of Orange. He did not support William of Orange. From here it's clear he becomes a Catholic, and that's when he became the Panther. And next, because of this, he lost his position as poet laureate. Then he went to work, and then he also translated complete Aeneid. That is an Italian epic. We already know there are Greek epics like Iliad and Odyssey. Italian Aeneid is Aeneid, and he actually translates it. Now, he find more place translations of Juvenal, Persius and Virgil. All these Italian writers, dramatists, he translated all these works. And then there are a volume of fables. These are not very important information, but just know. But his most important works are Hindan the Panther, All for Love, Asterodex, and all these works. Please remember all those things. And Dryden was known for writing criticisms as well. So we'll just focus on, we have already talked about all his works, we'll just focus on his poetry. So heroic stanzas, he bought out heroic stanzas, he actually wrote them more and more, and heroic stanzas are basically 27 few fine lines and images. It is bombastic, it is like stanzas have a lot of metaphors, it has a lot of meanings, and then it's influenced by Cowley. As we all know, Cowley was a metaphysical poet, so from him he was influenced. Next, his work was Annus Mirabilis, his writing of the two great events, the war with Holland and the fire of Ronald. This work dealt with two incidents. One event was the war with Holland, and the next one was the fire of London. So these two works were written by Dryden, and they are poetry. And of course, we have already seen the other works. Political satire is Absalom and Achitophel. As we already mentioned, the Shaftesbury and all the other people. Duke of Buckingham under that of Zimri. These are all coming under the characters of Absalom and Achitophel. Next, we see the medal is insective against Shaftesbury. Writing against Shaftesbury in this work called the medal, but it's not his most popular work as such. And then finally it's MacFlecknoe. It's a swearing personal attack on former friend Thomas Shadwell. He hated Shadwell so much that he wrote a work against him, and that work was called MacFlecknoe. And then two great doctrinal poems, as we already mentioned. It was a religious poem, that was Religio Lacey and Hind and the Panther. Only two works were religious poems. And then he wrote fables. Fables written amid the anxieties of Dryden's last years. You know, fables are short stories which give out morals. By the end of the age, he started writing fables. So that's about it. And then, finally, you know, his imaginary power, his spiritual thing, everything was shown in his works. And two remarkable odes he wrote. Two remarkable odes. This will come under poetry. To the memory of Mrs. Annie Killingbrew and Alexander's Feast. Alexander's Feast and a memory of Mrs. Anne Killingbrew. These two are his most famous odes. He holds his own as a satirist and as a reasoner in verse. When he began to write State of Uncertainty in regard to the best form to adopt, he didn't know which form to adapt with the best, but he tried out all the forms as such. And then, we already saw Oliver Cromwell's work, Asterodex, and Panegyric. With Absalom and Achitophel, he made form. He came into the proper form. And finally, he wrote a criticism which is very important. Please remember this work, Essay of Dramatic Poesy, is a very important critical work. In that, he deals with what tragedy is, what a drama should be, and all these things. He deals with Essay of Dramatic Poesy. So this is all you need about Dryden and his works. Next, we will get into the next writer, Samuel Butler. So we have seen Dryden and we are going into Samuel Butler. Samuel Butler, you don't need to know anything about him, rather than he wrote one important work alone, and that is Hudibras. He wrote only one important work, and that's called Hudibras. It was basically Cervantes' Don Quixote book. He just tried to imitate it, and that was Hudibras. We all know this is an amazing book by Cervantes, and even Salman Rushdie recently retold the story, the same story. And finally, the king, even the king carried a copy of Samuel Butler's Hudibras. Very famous during the time. It was a satire on the Puritans. Puritans were very strict. They did work. They didn't go for movies or anything. They were living a strict life, and that influenced Samuel Butler to write the great Hudibras. Of course, it's a vulgar kind of story. Attempts of these two put down a bear. That's the storyline. There's attendant and Ralpho. These two are trying to put out a bear. They are trying to kill a bear. That's the storyline. To the modern day, Hudibras is far too long. Actually, now if you want to sit and read Hudibras, it will be very difficult because it's too long. You will not have so much time. And then its local and temporary nature of a subject matter disadvantage in the eyes of reader today. Of course, it was just a satire during the time. We did not understand it. And finally, is its intention to kill Puritanism by ridicule. They told to satire it and write about it. That was the point. His poem delighted the court, favorite reading of Charles II. And of course, when he died a very miserable death. He was in poverty and he died. Now, we have already seen prose work of Dryden, and Dryden's age prose works were different. We already seen essay of dramatic poesy as such, and now we will see what kind of things are there. Mainly of essays and preference dealing with questions connected with poetry and drama. So now we see the restoration. All these prose works are different. So let's see what are the prose works. We already saw essay of dramatic poesy. He considered drama to be three, that is classical drama of the Greeks and Romans, that is important. Next is neoclassical drama of the French, and then comes the romantic drama of the English. So he thinks first classical drama of the Greeks are important. Next they talk about neoclassical drama of the French, Greeks, French, and then the English. So he thinks these are the three chief types of drama as such. Okay, and now we have seen enough of Dryden. Now we get into Samuel Butler, and finally we talk about John Bunyan. Now John Bunyan is an important writer here, but you should all understand one thing. Milton was from a rich background. He also wrote biblical stories, and his work was too imaginative, but even common people could not read Milton's famous work, Paradise Lost. But John Bunyan was a poor man. He did not have even proper education, but he read the Bible always. He preached on the streets. They sent him to jail, and that's when he wrote a lot of works. He was a poor man, but his work in the Christian realm, right? Right after the Bible, only his book has sold more. There's no other book than his book. That's Pilgrim's Progress. So, he was actually a warrior, soldier during this time, and that time he writes this. First, of course, his autobiographical work, and that is called Grace Abounding, his life story. That's Grace Abounding. And his most famous work, there are two parts of actually, the Pilgrim's Progress. Pilgrim's Progress, it's basically an, it is a work where characters' names are virtues and vices. So, it can be meant with anyone else. Okay, for example, right? He was obtained license to preach, and he preached. As I already said, he was preaching, but sometimes he mostly go to the jail, and he will come back, and people will not like his ways. Now, his most famous four works are Grace Abounding, Pilgrim's Progress, The Life and Death of Mr. Badman, The Holy War. These are his four main works, but you should also remember Pilgrim's Progress has two parts, part 1 and part 2. Part 1 is where the character called Christian goes to salvation. In the second part, you can see his wife Christina going on a salvation journey. So we see like four works: Grace Abounding, Pilgrim's Progress, Life and Death of Mr. Badman, and The Holy War. So next we see, of course, he wrote, it's a prose allegory. That's what I am trying to say. It was a beautiful prose allegory where everything was, characters were like good man, bad man, better man, and all these names were given for all these things. Okay, not an educated man, as I said already, knew nothing of the classic style. He had the authorized version of the English Bible by heart. He memorized the Bible by heart. That's why his works, if you read it, it's very similar to the Bible. Of course, Milton and Bunyan are Puritans, but he's a different kind of Puritan and Bunyan is a different kind of Puritan. Of course, we have small writers like the prose writers, and one such writer is William Temple. So William Temple, actually he wrote letters and essay, plain but polished style. You don't need to know a lot of them, just know their names. Then there is Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes, you should remember one important work that is called Leviathan. Leviathan, or the matter, form and power of the Commonwealth. This is a very important work. Thomas Hobbes, Leviathan, you remember that alone. And next we come to John Locke. This is important in psychology, philosophy and literature. This important work, Essay on the Human Understanding. This work is important. John Locke is one work. It's a very philosophical work. That is the Essay on the Human Understanding. Then government and thoughts on education. He was more of a non-fiction kind of writer rather than a fiction writer. And then minor writers of the time, we see John Elwyn and Samuel Pepys. They both are diarists. They wrote diaries. Elwyn is author of Silva, the first book on trees and forestry in English actually, and Terra, which is the first attempt at the scientific study of agriculture. So he was kind of interested in agriculture and all, so he wrote this work. But his diary is very, very important to understand it. So world has lost sight of about two good books. So diary record of the contemporary records. They wrote diaries and they are called diarists. The diaries are very, very popular. Okay, they are the first diarists. And then Pepys' diary is most entertaining of books during this time. And it covers like almost 10 years. 1st Jan 1660 to 31st May 1669. It covers 10 years. The diary covers 10 years and a very entertaining, useful thing. He writes about common people, all the people he writes about. The writers eyesight gave out. Of course, they lost their eyes. They talked about fashion scandals of the town, what other problems. The coffee houses, the playhouses. Pepys wrote for himself, used to shorthand the diary. Why did he use shorthand? Because he didn't want all the secrets to be out. He used code words. Who had affairs with whom and all these things. And finally, we come to the drama. So we've seen prose, we've seen poetry, and all the minor works and all. Now we see. Now you should understand. After Shakespeare, there was a complete lack of drama because in Puritan age they closed up theatres, and now only some dramatists were allowed, and these are some of the dramatists. One is William Wycherley, and then most common dramatist is William Congreve. Congreve wrote, of course, the Morning Bride and The Way of the World. This is a very important work. So these two works, remember it. And John Vanberge, George Farquhar. These are all some minor writers. You don't need to know too much of them, but just know. And he wrote Short View of Profaners. Of course, Immortality of the English Stage he wrote. Allfellow we already seen, based on Antony Killincraw. And Thomas Otway, Orphan, Venice, Preserved. These are the three works he wrote. Orphan, Venice and Preserved. Nathaniel Lee is one of the another writer in this age. So that's about it. Thank you folks. Take care.